Today, 35 senior city bosses stuck their heads above the parapet to say the coalition is right about the public spending cuts. They all co-signed a supportive letter drawn up by the Conservative peer and next Chief Executive, Lord Wolfson. But the Shadow Chancellor again urged a slower pace to dealing with the deficit. He called the cuts a huge gamble with growth and jobs. Our business correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy, has this report.
If you were shopping for a group of people to back your spending cuts, you'd struggle to find bigger names than these. The bosses of Next, Veetee, Asda, Microsoft and the drinks giant Diageo. They and 30 others put their names to a letter in the Daily Telegraph today, backing George Osborne's cuts. In it, they told the Chancellor that to delay
would result in almost £100 billion of additional national debt by the end of this Parliament. In the end, the result would be deeper cuts or further tax rises.
George Osborne hasn't made too many friends recently as details of the spending cuts begin to leak out. But today, just 2 days before the spending review, some of Britain's biggest business leaders, including the chairman of Asda, have come out and given him their backing. But the people who live around here, who stand to be most affected by the cuts, say the business leaders should keep out of it.
I think they're doing too much too soon, but I don't think big business should get involved with it.
They're making decisions for the rest of everybody else. I think we should have our say-so, we as individuals. They are making decisions for themselves and not for us. Obviously, their own financial circumstances are obviously a lot better.
Business leaders, they're selfish, thinking about their own personal interests, not thinking about us.
The truth.
Alan Johnson, giving his first speech as Shadow Chancellor today, said it was the ordinary people who will bear the brunt of the cuts.
The coalition's austerity strategy amounts to a huge risk with growth and jobs. By going hell for leather on cuts at a time when the private sector cannot be expected to pick up the slack, they run the risk of leaving us with higher unemployment, deprived communities and a diminished society.
The cut now versus cut later debate cast a heavy shadow over the general election. Since then, the International Monetary Fund, the CBI, the Business Lobby Group and the Institute of Directors, among others, have backed the coalition's strategy.
They believe as businessmen that they've taken 25% out of their cost structure in a year. The government's going to do it over 5 years. What's the problem? You know, all these things, I think, come together to make them, really feel they have an obligation to say something. And that's what they've done. They've said it.
The business leaders also argue that
the private sector should be more than capable of generating additional jobs to replace those lost in the public sector.
That's a claim some might dispute. PricewaterhouseCoopers, the accounting firm, only last week said the private sector would itself have to shed nearly 500,000 jobs as a result of the government cuts. Whoever wins the argument, having Asda back their man George today certainly did the Chancellor no harm.
Siobhan Kennedy. Well, earlier I spoke to Moni Varma. He's the chairman of the Veetee food company and a signatory to the letter to the Daily Telegraph. I asked him why he was so optimistic about the government's cut strategy and the effect upon his own business.
As soon as there was a downturn, more and more people started eating at home, more and more people started buying, the less expensive varieties, perhaps getting away from all those fancy and expensive restaurants. So there's always, room for us to look at other things, other avenues.
Well, but you see, your letter, which you co-signed, private sector should be more than capable of generating additional jobs to replace those lost in the public sector. Hard to see that, isn't it?
Okay, let me tell you in my own case, contrary to whatever may or may not be happening elsewhere. Now, we may be unique, right? So I sympathize with those that cannot, but we're expanding.
Well, you've got 100 jobs to begin with, so it would only be a few jobs, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, I can't cater for all the country, but we're almost doubling the plant capacity right now. So those that are mindful of all this...
Well, how many jobs will it be?
I think at least 150. So if it's 100 right now, at least another 50 to be created in the next 1 year. Now, we're only a small little business, but like us, if somebody also thinks along these lines. Let me take
but what about
back.
the banking liquidity, though? Because a lot of small businesses say they can't borrow the money to do that kind of an expansion. Have you got very sympathetic banks?
But we are a small business and we are borrowing because the story that we tell is right. The the results that we are giving is right, so the banks are sympathetic to that. Right?
So you've had no problem getting money from the bank to do what you want to do?
No, I wouldn't say that we've had no problem. We've had difficulties, right? But they're not insurmountable difficulties, right?
But it sounds to me as if you're saying a kind of Churchillian kind of effort, and you will be able to resist the what comes out of a savage period of cuts.
But we are in those kind of times, John. Somebody, you know, if this is a popularity decision that somebody's got to make, right? They're not going to win a popularity contest, but we're in tough times, right? So there's got to be sacrifices, and there is no universal appeal policy which will appeal to the rich and appeal to the poor and appeal to everyone.
Why do you think it has to be done so fast?
Well, it's got to be done because, you know, every day that goes by, you're just deepening and widening the hole. You're leaving, you know, that to future generations. It may be insurmountable at that time. So I think, you know, every day that has gone by is a day too late.
Alan Johnson has told us that this letter is just a wheeze got up by Conservative Party Central Office. Do you feel part of a wheeze?
No, not really.
Who asked you to sign?
Who asked me to sign? I think, you know, I have several friends there, you know, but I agree with the policy. Let's forget about who asked me to sign. I can name that if that makes any difference, right? I can name the person. When Stanley Fink, who is now perhaps the treasurer of the party, mentioned, and when I looked through all the aspects of the cut, I fully agreed that somebody has got to take this measure.